Alrighty, we're officially recording. Alrighty, so today is, if we think of historical trauma as history, the context, we have to distinguish it from intergenerational trauma, or the trauma that is accumulated across generations or even intergenerationally. For example, family violence, parents physically abusing their children, sexually abusing their children. These kinds of ways the trauma is also passed down because of the intergenerational interactions. Now, I want to do a group activity, but before we do that, I'm going to show you guys just a couple of TikToks because we can play videos again. So get ready to talk, but here we go. Let's watch these first.
So a lot of y'all be trying to act like we just got this victim mentality and that we just be going on and on about stuff that really got nothing to do with it. Let me explain to you what epigenetics is. Epigenetics is the study of how our mind and body interpret our DNA sequencing differently based on our behavior and also our environment.
Oh no, I don't think I'm screen sharing. Oh God, there's too many things to keep straight sometimes. Sorry, Zoom. There we go.
My people who did their experiences and traumas and traditions all got passed down to me. So shout out to everybody who out there trying to break them generational curses. I know it's not easy, but we just got to keep going.
Yes. This guy,
it's also
historical,
and it's also transgenerational. And we just can't help pass it. If I carry trauma, I can be sure to pass it on to my kids unless I resolved it, worked it out. If you look at the larger question of why are so many kids being diagnosed, well, you know it can't be a genetic problem because genes don't change in a population over 5 years or 10 years. More and more parents are stressed. Guess what? More kids are going to get diagnosed. And then we say, the kid's got a disease, let's give him a pill.
So if you're on, oh, I just pressed off twice. There we go. All righty, Zoom land, hold tight. We're gonna get the room switched over. So in groups of 2 or 3, you guys are you're pretty good. I would say let's maybe it'll just be one group here. You guys in the front will kind of come up and join the back. And one big group here. You guys are gonna come together. If you're on Zoom, I'm going to split you into 2 breakout rooms too, and you're going to consider these questions for a couple minutes, and then we'll report out, and I've got some more content for you to chew on. Let's put 2 songs on. Let's see here. Okay. Okay, we got 2 songs, everybody. Zoom land, let me copy and paste for you. I was like, it definitely does say groups of 2 or 3, but we have a small groups today. So just big groups all together. So if you're going on Zoom, you're going to go into a breakout room and discuss the questions in the chat. I put them there so you can access them. It doesn't work if I broadcast a message. So hang tight. We're going to report out in about 5 minutes. Just a couple minutes left, couple minutes left. One minute left, last minute, everybody. All righty. Okay. All righty. Okay, yeah. All righty, everybody, we'll come back together. Multifunctional necklace. Oh, yeah. This is what our ceremonies sound like, where they wear so many shells on their dresses. That it sounds like this always, really. Isn't it? It's a very nice sound. And when you hear the young women walk in their dresses, there's no other sound except the swaying of their shells. So before we get into what these things look like from a literature perspective, how would we distinguish historical trauma from intergenerational trauma from this new thing, adverse childhood experiences? What did we learn from the readings this week? Only need a couple offerings. Go ahead.
Talk about just some like simpler definitions of what
Mhm.
historical trauma is for like large group of people who all have the same trauma. So like what you were saying,
Mhm.
boarding schools, like that's an historical trauma.
Mhm.
Intergenerational trauma is when in families of family through each generation, and then average childhood experiences is more.
Yes, exactly. Individual. That's the clincher with the adverse childhood experiences. Did I see a hand, please?
In regards to like generational trauma,
Mhm.
like, the difference, from what, like the difference between historical trauma and generational trauma is historical trauma, like happened, at that moment.
Mhm.
Intergenerational trauma is basically, generations are inheriting, traumas from the previous generation.
Mhm.
That the previous generation, has not been able to heal.
Mhm. Mhm. It's like it's compounding, right? So you have this historical backdrop, and one could say, it's hard to, even though historical trauma has so many definitions and we intuitively know what it is, if we were to try and maybe look at some of these, like the cyclit or the what we call things now, one could imagine, right, these events where entire communities, entire populations are experiencing PTSD on like generational scales. And we know in present day, if you experience something that causes PTSD even once, it's hard. Like we don't have mental health in a world where, like, I mean, honestly, CPTSD, to my understanding, I don't think it's even in the DSM, which is what they use to like diagnose people. So like our understanding of trauma is right now only getting to a place to even try and intervene. So you can imagine, right, where like in historical circumstances, people were experiencing huge events that were leaving very tangible neurological and like body implications, because that's what happens when you experience a traumatic event. And without healing that, we see it being transferred in the biology of things. But then there's also that social layer too, right? Where the behaviors may also come with coping through substance, violence, etc. Now, that's how we're seeing too the trauma go generationally, both through the body and then through those interactions. Let's see here. We got some thoughts from Zoom land I want to read out. Thanks, guys. Trauma from one generation can impact the next by the way they think and go about interacting with them. They will now have a statement that will not change their mind about. For the first one, saying that historical trauma targets many people and not only just one person or group. Intergenerational trauma targets a specific lineage of people over generations, and childhood is targeting, right, the single person who's experienced it. I love the point too. Trauma can shape the way the next generation feels and thinks about certain things, because that next generation sees, but also understands what pains and consequences came from those certain events. The trauma can reshape thinking and even cultural knowledge from generation to generation. Trauma can be used to inform how a generation will interact with the world. Very much so. And if we know it's not equally distributed, that means that this is a further way people experience marginalization, and arguably the most pernicious. Last point here, trauma experienced by one generation impacting the next, because suffering is inevitably transferred through a lot of aspects of life, whether it be emotionally or physically. Thank you guys for this really good commentary. Now, ooh, oh God, that was a lot. We're gonna come back to these at the end, but you know, some of this lives in the public sphere now. Like, these are conversations people are having. And so I got a couple good memes from it. Trauma in a person decontextualized over time looks like personality. Trauma in a family decontextualized over time looks like family traits. Trauma in a people decontextualized over time looks like culture. What have you been up to? Oh, just redesigning my DNA, freeing myself of ancestral trauma, mastering my soul lessons, you know, just cultivating space for the abundance flow that I am, giving thanks for it all. This kind of touches on something I said last time that, you know, if this is something that's in your lineage, whether you want to or not, you might have to go through certain experiences if you want to move in a way that's it has, you know, shows integrity to how you want to show up in the world and isn't just a knee-jerk response to the life you've had to survive up until that point. But don't get it twisted. You are doing nothing short of redesigning your very DNA. And so no wonder some days are harder than others. And it's not light work, and you can, or rather it is light work, but it's not easy work. And you can see why in some ways those before you either were not able or chose not to heal these things, because they're, you know, some would say a more rational choice would be to just find a way around it instead of trying to tinker with your very own DNA. Now, nonetheless, never underestimate a cycle breaker. Not only did they experience years of generational trauma, but they stood in the face of the trauma and fought to say, this ends with me. This is brave. This is powerful. This comes at a significant cost. Never underestimate a cycle breaker. Many of you, just by being on campus, are already in that path. I was like, you know, only the strong survive, but you're here. That's how you know. That's sometimes hard to say though, too. I was like, now I wanted to, does he remember last time I talked about the body keeps the score, right? It's a very important book that if you are interested at all, I highly recommend reading it. It is something though that has just like people love it in the world. So there's a lot of good material on it. This is a slightly longer video. I think it's like 10 minutes, but it's from the author themselves. And I just love it from end to end. Like if you didn't read the book and you watch this video, you could still have a really good conversation about it. Okay, let's see here. And we can hear things again in class, which I love. Maybe we might have to go to the YouTube. No, it says it's okay. I think we'll just go to the YouTube. Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh.
Important thing to know is that there's a
Zoom, let me
difference
know if you're not seeing it, but I'm hoping you are.
to say to people, life sucks a good amount of the time. We all have jobs and situations that are really unpleasant. But the moment that the situation is over, it's over. The problem with trauma is that when it's over, your body continues to relive it. My name is Bessel Vanderkolk. I'm a psychiatrist, neuroscientist, and author of the book, The Body Keeps the Score. I got instances of trauma on my first day working at the Veterans Administration. 1978 was the year, and the Vietnam War was over by about 6 or 7 years. The very first day that I met Vietnam veterans, I was just blown away. These were guys who were my age, who were clearly smart and competent and athletic, and they clearly were just a shadow of their former self. Their bodies were clearly affected by trauma, and they had a very hard time connecting with new people after the war. Around that time, a group of us started to define what trauma is. And in the definition of PTSD, we write, these people have been exposed to an extraordinary event that's outside of normal human experience. And in retrospect, that shows us how ignorant and narrow-minded we were, because it turned out that this is not an unusual experience at all. People usually think about the military when they talk about trauma, but at least 1 out of 8 kids in America witness physical violence between their parents. A larger number of kids get beaten very hard by their own caregivers. A very large number of people in general, but women in particular, have sexual experiences that were clearly unwanted and that left them confused and enraged. So, unlike what we first thought, trauma is actually extremely common. There's a lot of debate of what a trauma is to this day. But basically, trauma is something that happens to you that makes you so upset that it overwhelms you. There is nothing you can do to stave off the inevitable, where you basically collapse in a state of confusion, maybe rage, because you are unable to function in the face of this particular threat. But the trauma is not the event that happens, the trauma is how you respond to it. One of the largest mitigating factors against getting traumatized is who is there for you at that particular time. When as a kid you get bitten by a dog, it's really very scary and very nasty. But if your parents pick you up and say, oh, I see that you're really in bad shape, let me help you. That dog bite doesn't become a big issue because the foundation of your safety has not been destroyed. We are profoundly interdependent people. And as long as our relationships are intact, by and large, we're pretty good with trauma. It's a subjective experience, and what may be traumatic for you may not be traumatic for me, depending on our personality and our prior experiences. The problem with trauma is that it starts off with something that happens to us, but that's not where it stops, because it changes your brain. Much of the imprint of trauma is in a very primitive survival part of your brain that I like to call the cockroach brain. There's a part of you that just picks up what's dangerous and what's safe. And when you're traumatized, that little part of your brain, which is usually very quiet, continues to just send messages. I'm in danger. I'm not safe. That event itself is over, but you continue to react to things as if you're in danger. We're talking about survival. We're talking about staying alive. As some people go into fight flight, or on a more primitive level, people's brain shuts down and they collapse. You have these automatic responses that are not a product of your cognitive assessment, they're a product of your animal brain trying to stay alive in the face of something that part of your brain interprets as a life threat. And the problem then becomes that you are not able to engage, or to learn, or to see other people's point of view, or to coordinate your feelings with your thinking. Traumatized people have a tremendous problem experiencing pleasure and joy. But the core issue is our hormones and our physiological impulses that have to do with survival. Your body keeps mobilizing itself to fight. You have all kinds of immunological abnormalities, endocrine abnormalities, And that really devastates your physical health also. Oftentimes the physical problems are longer lasting than the mental problems. And the other thing that is terribly important is the impact of poverty, or the impact of racism, or the impact of unemployment. There's other societies that are much more trauma savvy than we are, where there is not an enormous amount of income inequality. Healthcare is universal, childcare is universal. A culture like that really looks at what are the antecedents for certain forms of pathology. So the big issue is a political issue. How do we rearrange our society to really know about trauma so that people who grow up under extreme adverse conditions can become full-fledged members of society? The sense of community and people being there for each other is a critical part of surviving and thriving.
Get smarter, faster with new videos every week from the world's biggest thinkers.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. Now, this is where we picked up, or where we left off last week, that, you know, we're seeing this in Native communities being described as the soul wound, and how the soul wound is accumulating over time, and there are associations between it and other outcomes like substance use, diabetes, violence, suicide. None of these are positive outcomes. We intuitively knew these things, like we had teachings, we had, because it's not like it was just with settler colonialism that indigenous people experienced bad things. We actually had rituals and ceremonies for almost every situation you could imagine. So it is instead this unresolved grief, this inability to process things, where you see these negative outcomes. That's actually, they say, the difference between us and animals. And I love the cockroach brain analogy, but I'm, positive self-talk. When I was telling you guys earlier about not doing stuff when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, nervous system regulation, the analogy I saw or heard once that really helped me picture it was, imagine a horse with a rider. That normally the rider is in charge. That's like your prefrontal cortex, your decision making, your stuff, that's you up here. But if something spooks the horse, the rider has no control. It just has to hope to hold on. And like, you can't tell that horse, chill out, like you're talking to the human that's on top of it. You've got to calm down the horse before the rider can regain control. And so that part of our brain that starts bucking like a horse, animals have it too, but animals, they say if animals got PTSD, they'd be neurotic messes like all of us. But, most animals, especially prey animals, almost die like once or twice a day. That's just part of living. And so they get those life or death experiences, but their brains and their body don't hold on to it in the same way that human brains do. The way they shake it off, quite literally, is like a neurological reset that lets that energy go. Humans, it's a little harder to hack that system, especially because a lot of the things you might wind up healing later on may have happened to you before you could even remember them. I was like, I always tell this darkly, because when I started learning about this kind of stuff, about toxic stress and chaos and what it can do to the brain, I remember telling my mom something to the effect, I was kind of like, I'm always wanting to share whatever I've learned. I'm how old, but I still want to. And so I was telling her, like, oh my God, did you know that they say that actually the stuff that happened to a baby's brain before they can even remember could have like much bigger implications than beyond that, because of how special that baby brain is. And I shit you not, my mom darkly laughs and goes, oh, you guys are fucked then. Yeah. Cause yeah, we had some hairy things. I knew enough from memory, but it is something that why am I bringing this information to you today? We might carry it over into next week a little. Quick note, I might add one reading to next week because I was always meaning to find something for Indigenous resilience, but I'm going to revisit it. If it doesn't feel like we have to, I might not, but I will tell you guys before the weekend. But if this does go into next week, the reason I pair it like that is because I don't think you can appreciate our resilience without understanding all that we've overcome and continue to overcome. And you can't appreciate your own resilience without knowing what you've overcome. And the the things we inherit, the genetic part of all this, even the stuff that we don't have choices about when we're dependent on our caregivers. These are things that we are starting to quantify and capture and be able to show as close to causally as we can, that these things, while once may have seemed unrelated, are actually quite related through a variety of mechanisms. And so what they did with the Filiti et al. Study, which started this whole conversation, was essentially they were trying to explain whether or not there was any connection between the diabetes and the obesity they were seeing in, I want to say it was like recovery kind of scenarios. If there was any connection between that and trauma in childhood, because the people who were interviewing and working with people were kind of starting to see that, like, the substance use, people like to party and get caught up, like that's part of it too. But there seemed to be this weird connection and comorbidity when things go together of trauma, stories, experiences of trauma, substance use, but then these other like lifelong health implications. And so they devised a survey of 10 questions whereby, things like, were you ever physically abused? Were you ever sexually abused? Did you ever see your mother treated violently? Did anyone in the home ever go to jail? Did anyone ever die? It's 10 really fun questions, clearly. But essentially, they discovered that a score of 4 or more, irrespective of your historical or your intergenerational trauma, just you and what you'd remembered experiencing in your life, if you could say yes to 4 or more of those questions, it exponentially increase your risk of a variety of chronic health conditions above and beyond the mental health disorders that often went with it. And so they were able to show that this is really coming down to the brain effects of this extreme trauma and chaos on the brain and how shit rolls downhill. It's impacting academic performance, impulsivity, the actual mesolimbic structures, the ability of the brain to regulate itself. A baby brain, I don't want to be like, you look at a baby too mean and it fucking hurts it. Like, the brain is that special and so precious that things, parents, everyone's parents fuck them up a little, but in a way that there's so much knowledge that I wish people had about the baby brain, because like, I don't want to be like, if you're gonna fight, at least go 2 houses down, because yeah, a baby hearing it through the walls when they're little, it leaves marks on their brain. It changes the way their brain is wired. And if you're sitting here being like, fuck, that's okay. I'm right there with you guys. And so we will keep this going next week. We're at time now, but it also means that if you have this legacy, that when that horse is bucking, listen to the horse. And this is a week where my horse is talking louder than I thought it was going to be. So take care of your own horses, do what you can, rest and play, grieve and be with your people. No office hours today because I just don't feel like I can give you guys my best. But if you are waiting for an email, that's what I'm going home to do right now. Give me a chance to be with my cats and I'll be right. If you have questions on Zoom, you can hang out for a bit, but I've officially stopped content. So thank you for hanging with us. And I hope you guys have a good weekend. Next week's an awesome week. Please try and be here in person if you can be. I don't know if anyone here's waiting for me. I've got just a couple people in the room. If not, I'm gonna turn the Zoom off soon. Hi, Veronica, are you here with a question? I see you're here. I might just be cool background sounds, 'cause I don't want to hang up on you though if you are.